The grand, sweeping gates of Buckingham Palace have long served as a visual boundary between the ordinary world and a realm governed by strict tradition, ancient protocols, and carefully managed public perceptions. For generations, the British public and observers worldwide have looked at the collective image of the royal family as a symbol of unchanging permanence. A monolithic institution where individual desires are routinely sacrificed for the greater good of the crown. Yet behind the heavy limestone walls and the immaculate facades presented during national celebrations, a quiet but profound transformation is reshaping the very foundations of the monarchy. The subtle shifts in power, the unspoken rivalries, and the contrasting visions for the future of the institution are rarely broadcast in explicit statements, but rather play out in the smallest, most fleeting moments that only the sharpest observers manage to catch. It is in these fractions of a second, buried beneath the pageantry and the smiles of formal receptions, that the true state of the modern monarchy reveals itself to those who know where to look. To fully understand how the House of Windsor is navigating its most turbulent era of transition in modern history, one must look past the official press releases and delve into the complex web of personal ambitions, financial realities, and competing factions that are currently fighting for the soul of the institution. If you want to stay informed about the hidden dynamics of global institutions and the fascinating human stories that shape our world, please take a brief moment to subscribe to our channel and join our growing community of insightful viewers who look beyond the headlines. The intricate dance of royal public relations relies heavily on the maintenance of a unified front, an ideological projection that the family remains a solid, harmonious unit capable of weathering any contemporary storm. This particular philosophy was a hallmark of the late Elizabethan era, where internal family disputes were strictly kept behind closed doors, and the public was presented with an image of absolute stability and devotion to duty. Today, that tradition faces an unprecedented challenge as two distinct eras of royal management begin to collide in real time, creating a palpable tension that reverberates through every palace corridor and briefing room. On one side stands a traditional desire for inclusivity, a belief that family solidarity should ultimately triumph over past scandals, and that the public prefers to see a large, supportive network of relatives gathering for significant national milestones. On the other side, a much sharper, more pragmatic vision of the future is rapidly gaining ground. One that prioritizes efficiency, public accountability, and a ruthless streamlining of the royal apparatus to ensure its survival in a rapidly changing modern society. This fundamental disagreement is not merely an academic debate about the role of a constitutional monarchy, it is a live, ongoing conflict that manifests in the daily operations of the various royal households, each operating with its own set of priorities, advisors, and media strategies. The public often catches glimpses of this internal friction during major ceremonial events, where every gesture, glance, and seating arrangement is scrutinized by commentators and the public alike on social media platforms. These digital arenas have become the modern battleground for royal reputation, where a single moment captured on high-definition cameras can be slowed down, analyzed, and debated by millions of people within minutes of occurring. While traditional media outlets often hesitate to explore the deeper implications of minor familial interactions, the online community frequently identifies the subtle indicators of shifting power dynamics long before they are officially acknowledged. A momentary interaction at a crowded palace reception, a brief exchange of pleasantries on the steps of a cathedral, or a sudden change in the guest list for a private family gathering can signal a massive reversal of fortune or a decisive policy shift within the institutional hierarchy. The contrast between the official narrative of a peaceful, unified family and the underlying reality of institutional maneuvering has never been more pronounced. creating a fascinating subtext to every public appearance made by the senior members of the royal family, as the current administration attempts to establish its own unique identity and legacy. It must constantly contend with the looming shadow of the next generation, which is already establishing its own distinct footprint on the global stage. The relationship between the current monarch and the heir to the throne is naturally complex, shaped by a unique blend of familial affection, mutual dependence, and the inevitable tension that arises when two different generations prepare to govern. This tension is further complicated by the distinct styles of management favored by the respective offices, with the older generation favoring a more deliberate, sometimes cautious approach to institutional reform, while the younger court demonstrates an eagerness to implement sweeping changes and establish a modern, forward-looking agenda. The friction between these two approaches influences everything from the management of royal properties and the allocation of financial resources to the family's overall strategy regarding long-standing personal controversies that continue to threaten the reputation of the monarchy as a whole. The financial sustainability of the royal family has emerged as one of the most contentious issues of the modern era, as the public increasingly demands transparency and accountability regarding the use of funds derived from historic estates and public resources. The question of which extended family members should be entitled to official residences, financial support, and state-funded security has become a central point of contention between the competing factions within the palace. While older traditions favored providing a comfortable, secure lifestyle for a wide network of royal relatives, the modern reality requires a much more restricted definition of who represents the working core of the monarchy. This shift has inevitable consequences for those who have grown accustomed to the privileges of royal status, leading to quiet but intense disagreements behind the scenes as the institution attempts to reallocate its resources and project an image of fiscal responsibility to a skeptical public. At the heart of this evolving story is a fundamental question about what the modern British monarchy should look like and how it should justify its existence in the 21st century. The ongoing transition is not just about individuals or personal rivalries. It is about the structural survival of an ancient institution attempting to balance the weight of its history with the demands of a modern democracy. The decisions being made today regarding the roles of extended family members, the management of sovereign wealth, and the boundary between public duty and private privilege will shape the trajectory of the crown for decades to come. As the various factions within the palace continue to vie for influence and assert their respective visions, the public is left to decode the subtle signals and brief moments that reveal the true nature of this historic power shift. A narrative that continues to unfold with each passing day and every public engagement. The delicate balance of power within the walls of Buckingham Palace was recently captured in a singular, fleeting interaction that ignited a massive wave of discussion across social media platforms, highlighting a sharp divide between the official narrative of family unity and the ruthless political maneuvering taking place behind the scenes. During a highly publicized royal reception, observers noted a brief, affectionate moment when Prince William leaned in to greet his cousin, Princess Beatrice, with a quick peck on the cheek as she arrived at the venue. To the casual viewer or the traditional media outlets that chose not to dwell on the interaction, it appeared to be nothing more than a standard, reassuring sign of familial warmth during a busy public event. However, for those tracking the deeper currents of royal diplomacy, the gesture carried a profound and dark irony that recalled classic cinematic tales of institutional betrayal, masking a simultaneous, aggressive briefing campaign initiated by the Prince of Wales's own communications team. Literally as this public display of affection was being captured by cameras. Representatives for the heir to the throne were actively informing senior journalists at the Sunday Times that the long-standing living arrangements of Princess Beatrice and her sister Princess Eugenie were completely unacceptable and would not be tolerated under a future administration. This sudden and aggressive targeting of the York princesses highlights a significant structural conflict regarding the extensive network of royal properties that the king has quietly funded for years out of institutional resources, a practice that the next generation intends to dismantle completely. The revelation that the prince's team is already explicitly laying out what will occur when he ascends the throne has sent shockwaves through the various royal households, signaling the active presence of a highly organized shadow administration that is increasingly impatient to implement its own vision. For decades, the established fiction within the British monarchy dictated that the reigning sovereign would live indefinitely. A myth that the current king fiercely respected throughout his own exceptionally long tenure as heir apparent, by never casting forward publicly or privately to his own future reign. The current Prince of Wales, however, demonstrates no such hesitation, frequently and consistently broadcasting a clear message that massive, disruptive structural changes are coming the absolute moment he takes control of the institution. This forward-looking stance has caused immense frustration within the king's immediate circle, as the monarch's team finds themselves constantly defending their current policies against an assertive heir who appears to treat the present reign as a strictly limited transitional period. The tactical friction between the two courts was vividly demonstrated during a previous high-profile international engagement, which illustrated just how far the younger administration is willing to go to protect its own global standing at the direct expense of senior palace strategy. While the Prince of Wales was in mid-air en route to a logistically and politically sensitive official tour of Saudi Arabia, his team took the extraordinary step of issuing an independent, highly critical public statement regarding the ongoing and deeply damaging legal allegations surrounding Prince Andrew. The younger court had grown increasingly desperate as a fresh wave of horrific public disclosures emerged, including the resurfacing of highly controversial photographs from the New York townhouse of Jeffrey Epstein, which threatened to completely overshadow the prince's diplomatic mission. For weeks leading up to this moment, the heir had aggressively pressured and begged his father to issue a definitive final statement that would formally distance the working core of the monarchy from the Duke of York and establish a permanent barrier against any future institutional association. The king, characteristically prone to prolonged periods of deliberation and hesitation when dealing with complex family matters, had continually procrastinated, leaving the younger administration to feel increasingly vulnerable to the mounting public backlash, recognizing that the senior court's paralysis was about to completely torpedo a massive international visit that had required months of logistical and political capital to organize. The prince took matters entirely into his own hands by authorizing the mid-flight statement. The independent declaration expressed profound concern over the escalating allegations, effectively forcing the hand of the monarch's office and creating an immediate, unprecedented crisis of communications between the two highest levels of royal authority. The king's immediate staff were reportedly furious at what they perceived as an act of insubordination that completely jumped the gun, and their subsequent retaliation was swift, calculated, and devastating to the prince's immediate diplomatic objectives. Just as the prince's aircraft was touching down on the tarmac in Saudi Arabia, the king's office abruptly issued its own powerful statement, echoing the exact phrasing of concern that the prince had spent weeks demanding, but timing its release in a manner that completely monopolized the global media cycle. The monarch's sudden announcement that the palace would fully cooperate with civil law enforcement agencies if approached regarding the Duke of York's historical conduct immediately became the exclusive focus of international news organizations. The consequence of this coordinated administrative warfare was the total and immediate destruction of the prince's diplomatic tour. As the small army of international journalists and photographers traveling with the delegation instantly lost all interest in the local political engagements. Senior civil service sources later described the operational breakdown as an absolute joke, noting that in any standard corporate organization, the spectacle of a divisional chief executive and a parent company head issuing conflicting, uncoordinated statements on the same day would result in immediate dismissals. The global public and the media do not distinguish between the complex, competing internal offices of Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace, viewing them instead as a single collective entity that appeared completely incapable of projecting a unified message. The catastrophic timing left members of the travelling press corps looking at their phones in disbelief on the tarmac, with several prominent photographers immediately booking flights back to London. Fully aware that the geopolitical narrative of the tour had been permanently replaced by the imminent threat of domestic legal action against a senior royal prince, this internal struggle for administrative supremacy reached a critical turning point when the king's serious health challenges were first made public, causing an immediate and massive flow of institutional power and daily responsibility toward the younger court. During the initial period of medical uncertainty, the prince's team rapidly positioned themselves as the primary operational center of the monarchy, anticipating an accelerated transition and establishing terms for a modern, heavily streamlined institution. However, as the king's advanced medical treatments, including highly specialized immunotherapy protocols and cutting-edge ribonucleic acid vaccine therapies, began to yield remarkably successful clinical results, the domestic power dynamic underwent another sudden reversal, with medical specialists now confidently advising that the monarch may well live to enjoy something closely approaching a full natural lifespan. The senior court has launched an aggressive campaign to claw back the authority that had briefly drifted away. The king is now actively reasserting his absolute supremacy over the institutional hierarchy, effectively reminding his ambitious heir that the current administration is secure for the foreseeable future, and that the premature briefings regarding a future reign must come to an abrupt halt. The financial audit of this ongoing institutional struggle has brought to light the deep reliance of extended family members on semi-public funds, a reality that the palace has repeatedly attempted to obscure through a well-worn routine of shifting historical responsibility onto the legacy of the late Queen. When independent national audit reports revealed that the king was directly subsidizing the substantial market rents of non-working relatives out of the lucrative revenues of the Duchy of Lancaster. The official response from the monarch's communications team was to claim that these arrangements were simply part of a complex array of challenges inherited from the previous sovereign. This strategic effort to deflect contemporary public criticism by blaming a monarch who has been passed away for 3.5 years has been viewed by external observers as a piece of astonishingly audacious public relations. Critics have rightly pointed out that if the current administration truly desired to establish a clean break from the financial indulgences of the past, the appropriate moment to implement those sweeping reforms was at the absolute dawn of the new reign, rather than waiting years until the financial anomalies were officially uncovered by national watchdogs. This ongoing tension between the preservation of historical privilege and the harsh demands of modern financial transparencies continues to fracture the internal relationships of the family. creating a volatile environment where public gestures of warmth are consistently undermined by the cold realities of institutional survival. The severe reduction in operational scale within certain branches of the royal family extends far beyond the borders of the United Kingdom, finding its most dramatic and visible expression in the commercial struggles of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in their self-imposed exile. For an enterprise that initially launched into the global entertainment market with unprecedented fanfare and a massive staff of 16 full-time professionals. The current reality of a severely diminished team of just 5 individuals reveals the harsh boundaries of commercial sustainability outside the institutional safety of the monarchy. Inside sources close to the California-based operation have confirmed that among the remaining staff, the family nanny is practically the only employee who has managed to maintain a long-term position, highlighting a chaotic management style that has alienated numerous senior public relations and media executives. While professional media commentators recognize that high-profile figures must constantly adapt to changing market conditions, the rapid downsizing of their American enterprise speaks volumes about the immense difficulty of translating inherited royal status into a durable, independent commercial empire. Although the initial multi-million-dollar contracts signed with major streaming platforms like Netflix represented astronomical levels of income that ordinary individuals could never hope to accumulate in a lifetime. And the subsequent exit from Spotify still yielded a substantial $5 million parting payment. The overall business model has proven fundamentally unsustainable. The massive recurring expenditures required to maintain their elite lifestyle, including high-level private security teams, expansive residential mortgages, and the continuous overhead costs of a global brand, have rapidly outpaced their actual commercial productivity. The core issue confronting the couple is whether the total sacrifice of their familial relationships, the profound estrangement from the British royal family, and the ongoing loss of state-funded security can ever be justified by an unstable media empire that has failed to forge a sustainable identity in the highly competitive entertainment landscape. With their initial highly sensationalized content exhausted, they now face a critical 5-year window in which they must completely reinvent their economic strategy to ensure that their shrinking incoming revenues can match their extraordinary, non-negotiable outgoings. This economic reality is further complicated by the profound differences in financial awareness and real-world understanding that exist between the Duke and Duchess themselves. A disparity that has frequently manifested in naive and awkward interactions with senior Hollywood power brokers. While the Duchess is widely recognized by associates as being exceptionally astute, frugal, and highly conscious of the precise costs associated with running a modern commercial enterprise, the Duke remains entirely oblivious to the basic mechanics of personal finance. Having spent his entire formative life inside an institutional bubble where every imaginable luxury, travel arrangement, and personal expense was seamlessly managed by an invisible network of palace staff, he possesses virtually no concept of what goods and services actually cost in the real world. Sources have recounted numerous anecdotes of the Duke demonstrating utter bewilderment during high-level corporate meetings, occasionally asking senior media executives for simple refreshments, while completely failing to comprehend the professional hierarchy. Or conversely viewing relatively inexpensive operational costs as massive financial hurdles. This profound lack of practical grounding has contributed to a deep, underlying restlessness within the prince, who is increasingly viewed by those around him as experiencing a powerful sense of personal loss and an intense, unspoken desire to return to his homeland. He deeply misses the highly structured infrastructure of royal life, the effortless ability to command global attention for his philanthropic endeavors through the prestige of the crown, and the secure, familiar circle of lifelong friends and community that he abruptly abandoned in England. The most devastating aspect of this internal emotional crisis is the revelation from close sources that the Duke secretly harbored a persistent hope that his older brother, the Prince of Wales, would visibly struggle under the immense pressure of his expanding royal responsibilities. The Duke desperately wanted to be needed by his brother, clinging to the historic memory of their youth when they were destined to manage the burdens of the modern monarchy together as a cohesive partnership. Watching from afar as his brother thrives in his role, growing increasingly influential and self-assured without ever reaching out for assistance, has inflicted a deep psychological wound that prevents the exiled prince from view of family from a position of peace. The historical precedent for members of the royal family attempting to construct a highly successful, independent commercial brand in exile is remarkably bleak, with past figures consistently discovering that the public's fascination rapidly fades once the initial wave of controversy subsides. The absolute impossibility of maintaining a half-in, half-out royal existence has forced a profound divergence in the personal ambitions and long-term visions of the Duke and Duchess, despite the genuine strength and happiness of their private marriage. While the Duke remains fundamentally drawn to traditional, large-scale international philanthropy and longs to recreate the meaningful community service of his youth within a secure British framework, the Duchess is entirely focused on a glamorous lifestyle identity. She aspires to achieve the status of an elite, hyper-successful American entrepreneur and media mogul, a vision of personal success that relies heavily on high-visibility commercial ventures and an active, curated public profile that is completely incompatible with traditional royal modesty. This fundamental divergence in ideology is nowhere more apparent than in their starkly contrasting approaches to social media and child privacy, a topic that has drawn intense scrutiny and highlighted a massive disconnect in their global messaging campaign. The public was treated to an extraordinary spectacle when the Duke delivered highly emotional testimony in the High Court, condemning the historical commercialization of his childhood and arguing that being forced to perform for the public gaze had permanently damaged his life. Simultaneously, his wife was actively utilizing global digital platforms to share carefully staged photographs of their young children to promote her emerging lifestyle and commercial brands, demonstrating a profound internal contradiction. Although the couple continues to lecture global audiences on the vital importance of child safety in the digital age, their critics point out that protecting a child's facial features through creative camera angles is not the same as protecting their fundamental right to privacy, especially when those images are weaponized for corporate branding. This persistent pattern of utilizing high luxury resources while publicly framing